Hello, this is JMS Show, and we are back with another episode of the Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, Trump orders creation of U.S. Sovereign Wealth Fund, says a goodbye TikTok from Reuters.com, posted by Ninja Lover. And, I personally, don't really care for any sovereign wealth funds or government funds as a whole. Personally, I think the government should be getting any funds, not even taxpayer dollars at this point, if people don't want to voluntarily give it to them. But regardless, since Trump's in the position of authority currently, so he can justify whatever he wants to, I guess. But yeah, I personally wouldn't care about any country's sovereign wealth fund. I really don't like how the Saudis are using theirs to really lighten up their image, and I don't think I'll really care how the U.S. uses its one as well. Then we have MAGA doesn't understand how tariffs work from Donald Key, and that's across from the Fluent in Finance subreddit, and this video of Trump speaking at a rally, I guess, I don't know. And yeah, I personally don't really care for tariffs. I don't care for taxation as a whole, and tariffs are just a tax on imported goods. But, a lot of the tariff hate is simply because Trump's doing it. They were completely fine with a lot of people who thought they were the worst thing ever were completely fine with them under Biden, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have DOJ says Trump administration doesn't have to follow court order halting funding freeze from democracydocket.com, posted by Swamphanky Dan, and that's a cross post from the law subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for what Department of Justice says, or what the courts say for that matter. If it were up to me, we wouldn't have any government funding at all, and forced courts or Department of Justice for that matter. We should. I personally think the courts, they should have their say, but regardless, I personally don't really care for any of the actors involved in this story. So, I really couldn't care less. If they want to, if the DOJ says to freeze funding, they should be able to freeze funding. But they'll still probably piss it away regardless, because that's what the U.S. government does. It just pisses money away regardless of who's in power. Then we have Elon is now personally beefing with r/white people Twitter from FlimsyOut5563, and that's a tweet from Evan Loves Worf. He's going to send the FBI after Redditors. And that was him quote tweeting Elon Musk. They broken the law, and that was Elon quote tweeting Reddit lies. r/white people Twitter is now calling for the public execution of the Doge software developers, and it was a bunch of Reddit comments about that. And my thoughts on that are, I really don't care for Reddit. I use Reddit quite a bit, but I really don't care for the whole Reddit circle jerk. And I really don't like, and the thing with Reddit is you can post anonymously, so it's pretty much just progressive 4chan at this point. And yeah, and it's people who can hide behind the veil of anonymity, so they can say whatever they want to. But if it's the out group saying it, it's gonna get banned and censored. But it's the in group saying it, it usually stays up and doesn't get banned and censored. So that just goes to show you Reddit's bias towards the left and the progressives. When the right has death threats, it's the worst thing ever. But when the left does death threats, it's entirely justified. It only really matters who's in the in group and who's in the out group. Then we have Rubio says El Salvador offers to accept deportees from U.S. of any nationality, including Americans, from APnews.com, posted by LegioX. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that. I think if the El Salvador government wants to do that, I think they should be able to. But I do think the U.S. should stick to its own jurisdiction and not force its deportees on any other jurisdiction. Maybe I guess in this case the jurisdiction is consenting, but I would say definitely not American citizens. Maybe illegal immigrants, but definitely not American citizens. Then we have Trump administration finalizing plans to shutter education department hosted by Lemon Limelight from Politico, Trump administration filing plans to our education department. The Trump administration is finalizing plans to form the education department through an executive order that will build on the president's campaign promise to hammer the longtime conservative target. The order, which President Donald Trump is expected to sign sometime this month, according to a White House official, is expected to lay out a two-part strategy for shuttering the agency. According to two people familiar with the plans and granted an opportunity to discuss them, it will direct the department's crash plan to wind down its functions upon using its existing administrative authority, but the order was also expected to call for the agency to inventory a complex set of laws needed to delegate the department's powers to other agencies and then close the department. Acknowledgement that some of conservatives' biggest desires for change hinged on congressional approval. Such an order would launch a complex initiative. Some conservatives can see that they currently lack enough support for legislation to close the department and inform its core functions to other federal agencies. And yeah, I personally think that's a good thing. I don't really like the way Trump's going about it through executive order rather than through Congress, and I don't really like probably the reason he's going about it. It's not because he's a principled libertarian. It's because his corporate masters, like I think his name's Jeffrey Yoss, are probably telling him to. But regardless, I definitely do agree that this is probably one of the good things Trump's doing. But Reddit's so full of TDS, they think everything Trump does is automatically bad because Trump does it. So I do think this is a good thing. Hopefully, I would go for the Labor Department next if he tries to shut down another one. I tried to shut down as many departments as possible, but I don't know how long it's going to stick for, because the government only seems to grow regardless of which branch of the Uniparty is in power. And yeah, Trump might be saying, might be saying we're going to cut government, but I'm a bit skeptical that it's going to stick. I think John Stossel just had a good video on that out earlier today. How he's saying, they all say they're going to cut government, but you got to be skeptical. It never really sticks. The government really grows regardless of who's in power. Then we have Elon got r/white people Twitter banned from Reddit from FlimsyOut5563, and that's a cross post from the Fuck the Alt-Right subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for censorship, but as I said earlier, Reddit constantly censors right-leaning communities and subreddits for far less than what white people Twitter got away with. But now it's the in-group rather than the out-group getting censored, so suddenly it's the worst thing ever. I personally think I don't really care for censorship, as I said, but I personally think nothing of value is really lost. My only really regret is that the ban is temporary rather than permanent. Unlike a lot of right-leaning subjects, it usually ends up being a permanent ban, but this is just a temporary ban, and I would like it if it was a permanent ban. I personally would like if Reddit doesn't ban any subreddits, but if they want to have their TOS, want to enforce their TOS, I do think it should be enforced across the board, and that's why I think white people Twitter should be permanently banned rather than temporary banned. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Senate panel advances RFK Jr. nomination to head of Health and Human Services from thehill.com by Dr. 07. And yeah, I personally don't think RFK Jr. is libertarian. I do think he's probably one of Trump's better picks for his cabinet. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't say he's libertarian, especially because he wants to enforce a bunch of stuff like bans on food dyes and ingredients that some people might want to use. They might not be healthy for you, but people should still be able to want to use them if they want to. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, of course he does, about regulations in OSHA. He feels he could do whatever he wants from Yahoo.com, and I have Ragnarok XT, and that's crosspost from the DeFranco subreddit. Elon Musk suggests getting rid of all regulations in Midnight Call. And I would agree with getting rid of all regulations. I think there's too many rules. The government shouldn't be telling you what you can and can't do. It might hurt. It might end up with someone getting hurt because a lot of those, a good chunk of those regulations are probably made because someone died and they didn't want it to happen again. But you can either have freedom, you can either have dangerous freedom or peaceful slavery, and I would prefer dangerous freedom. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have WTF, and that's from Ragnarok XD, and that's crosswords from the Washington, D.C. subreddit. U.S. Attorney has sent a letter promising Elon Musk that the protesters will be targeted. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that. But, if the government wants to target protesters, I think they should be able to do so. January 6th, all the people on the left wanted the protesters targeted. But now that the protesters are the in-group rather than the out-group, suddenly it's the worst thing ever. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump says U.S. will take over Gaza Strip from Reuters.com by LegioX. And yeah, this is probably one of the things I most disagree of Trump doing so far and during his tenure as president. I think, the U.S. should be out of Israel entirely, not invading the Gaza Strip. But regardless, the government will justify what it justifies. I personally think if Trump wasn't up Netanyahu's ass, he'd probably be a lot better president. But yeah, if I were him yesterday, I'd have told Netanyahu to go fuck himself. But Trump just pretty much bent over and gave him a blowjob and said, "Oh, well, the U.S. is pretty much an Israeli colony at this point." I would say, especially if how much IPAC is running and influencing the government. Then we have CIA offers buyouts to entire workforce to align with Trump priorities, sources say, from Reuters.com by Swamp Yankee Dan. And yeah, I personally would agree with that. I would get rid of the CIA entirely, and hopefully this would be would be one of the ways they're cutting government. But I think Trump would just replace the CIA with people loyal to him rather than get rid of it entirely. And I don't think that's very libertarian. I think the libertarian position is get rid of the CIA entirely rather than just stack it with your sycophants. But I think Trump's probably much going to do the latter, even if I personally hope he will do the former. Then we have Reddit dropping the censor hammer, hundreds of subs being deleted today from Donald. It was from Donald Key, and that's cross post to the banned subreddit. And yeah, I personally don't really care for censorship, but as I said earlier, if Reddit does need to hold it's the same standards across the board, because right now, right-leaning communities are held to a different standard than left-leaning communities, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Elon Musk and Tesla took a pledge to promote China's core socialist values in order to keep selling cars there from FoxBusiness.com by Moose171D. And yeah, I personally don't really care for socialism but if Elon and Tesla want to sign the pledge to keep their active in the Chinese market, I think they should be able to justify doing it if they want to. I personally wouldn't sign the pledge and tell China to go screw themselves, but I guess I guess that wouldn't be a very economically smart move as well. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have, remember folks, Trump is anti-gun and anti-constitutional rights by Ragnarok KXG. And that's a quote from Karl Marx. Under no pretext should arms and ammunition be surrendered. Any attempt to disarm the workers must be frustrated by force if necessary. And then a quote from Ronald Reagan, who I know the Post mentioned Donald Trump. But apparently, they think Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan proved the same thing. Even though I would say Ronald Reagan was probably worse overall for the U.S. There's no reason why on the streets today citizens should be carrying loaded weapons. And yeah, I definitely would agree that Trump is anti-gun, but I would have used a quote from him there instead of Reagan. But yeah, it just goes to show you how, people will justify whatever whatever the person says as long as they're in the in-group rather than the out-group. A lot of leftists hate gun rights these days. They just elected David Hogg, one of the big anti-gun activists from the to the vice chair of the DNC. So yeah, I personally think this is just kind of pushing their agenda. I definitely don't think Trump really cares too much for the Second Amendment, but I don't think a lot of progressives do either. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And we have Rand Paul recoils at Trump's Gaza takeover plans. I thought we voted for America First from FoxNews.com by Ninja Lover, and they added, "Lepers ate my face. More evidence Rand Paul is a complete idiot. If Rand trusted Trump, then Rand can't be trusted." And yeah, I personally don't really care for the whole Gaza takeover thing, but hopefully it doesn't materialize, because Trump says a lot of stuff that doesn't end up materializing. But regardless, I think Rand Paul is probably one of the few Republicans with principles that's actually willing to stand up to Trump, and I think that's very good. He might not agree with everything Trump says, and like he's doing here, he might stand up against it. But regardless, I do think people. Rand Paul's definitely overhated from a lot of purist libertarian perspectives, but and yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. And yeah, I definitely do agree that we vote for America First. That's not Israel first, but apparently Donald Trump, he's up Netanyahu's ass, so he doesn't really care. And I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.